Nevertheless, probably no murder was intended that night, and it is a strange fact that had not one of those three women been in the laundry later that night, secretly washing those bloody undergarments which had been hidden away since Thursday, in all likelihood Emily Lancaster would still be alive. But one of them was there, and she heard a sound outside, perhaps when the gun fell. I have no doubt but that it was the intention to secure the keys that night anyhow, although the washing was more vital. But however it happened, one thing is sure. This woman found the automatic, shot Emily and got the keys from her. By the time George was aroused, she was safely inside the house by the basement door. But the keys were valuable only if they could be used, and there was a period of uncertainty following that. Talbot says that although he had been relieved of his job to let a police operative take his place, no plan was made at that time. For one thing, it was too dangerous. There were police and detectives all over the place, and although this killer of ours knew by that time that the money was in the trunk, she could think of no way to get at it. And I'd better say here that until Saturday night Talbot had believed what Margaret Lancaster had believed about the two murders, that Emily had killed her mother, and that the stepfather had shot Emily. It would be interesting to know if that theory originated with Margaret, or if someone else did not suggest it to her. Still acting more or less under duress, Talbot finally agreed to rent the house near Hollytree, and to take the trunk there if and when some plan could be arranged to get it. In the interval he hung around the McMullen place. Those were Lydia's orders, and he had to obey them. If he didn't, it meant back to the asylum for him. What hope had he of proving his case, even if it could be reopened? And to give up his job meant the bread line. That is why he was on the pavement the night Holmes took it away, and he rode right out into the country on the tail of the truck, with Holmes not suspecting he was there. The rest is about as I had imagined. He threw Holmes off the truck, after forcing him to stop it. But the poor little devil made a lunge toward it just as Talbot let in the clutch, and the thing went over him. Talbot went on. He had to go on. He had known from Holmes himself where his place in the country was, and after he took the trunk to the Hollytree house he simply took the trunk back there and left it. Simple, isn't it? But he was feeling pretty sick about Holmes himself. He went back to the place where he had left him, lying there with that handkerchief on his chest, but the body was gone. After that it was plain hell for him. He had been in Europe, as well as a lot of other places, and with that search for the trunk going on he disguised it with those labels from his own baggage. But he was terrified by that time. Here were 3 deaths already connected with that money, and he began to fear that he would be involved, and perhaps too to grow suspicious. He gave up his room and left his books, going to one far downtown, and waiting there for a message. Then at last it came, on Saturday. That was when he went out to the house at Holly Tree late in the evening, and what he found was Lizzie Cromwell shot to death in an upstairs bathroom, and his sister Lydia trying to get the body into the tub. Chapter 48. So Lydia Talbot had been our killer. She never made a statement, and she died of pneumonia shortly after her arrest. Perhaps Dr. Armstrong is the only one among us who feels any pity for her, and he quotes now and again that theory of murder being a reaction from extreme repression. But she had, he says, been a psychotic for many years, and he laid that terrible 2 weeks to a definite unbalance at the end. Like most of you, she lived an unnatural life, he said. Maybe she started only by wanting to escape that, and the money would do that for her. But there was something else, too. She'd shot and killed that woman years ago, and her brother had suffered the punishment for it. That must have weighed on her for many years, and now came the old woman's threat to send him back to it, and she went plain crazy. Here, however, he added something which explains a great deal that puzzled me for years. You can take one thing as a fact. Mrs. Talbot wasn't only locked away from her husband. She was locked away from Lydia. And Lizzie Cromwell was as much Lydia's keeper as anything else. For Hester Talbot not only knew that Lydia had killed that other woman in a fit of jealous rage, yes, jealous, Lou. You find things like that now and then. The human mind is a queer thing, but that she had been abnormal for years. Even now I have no details of that early crime of Lydia Talbot's, save that she had resented her brother's flight, had followed him and in some wild fury killed the girl in a hotel bedroom. What was outraged pride and what was actual jealousy no one now can ever know. But she had let him take the punishment and never spoken, and if Mrs. Talbot suspected the truth she had never whispered it. In a way, harboring Lydia after that must have been her revenge on the husband who had deserted her. I was married, by edict. Late in the September following, and if mother was resentful, she at least provided me with the usual dozens of this and that which the Crescent regards as essential to any bride. But Helen Wellington and I bought my trousseau, and I can still see mother eyeing a chiffon nightgown, and then stiffly leaving the room. We are very happy, Herbert and I, but now and then since I have found myself still wondering about different incidents of our crimes which I had failed to understand. Naturally too, as a bride I was interested in Herbert's part in the final capture of Lydia Talbot. And the entire story, as I have gradually learned it from Herbert, is interesting as showing the manner in which he reached his own conclusion as to the criminal. From the beginning it seemed probable that the murderer of Mrs. Lancaster either lived in the house or had been able to enter it without suspicion.